Welcome to the Farline Podcast, where we are having conversations with people who are doing the intentional work now for results down the road. We're looking at generational wealth. We're looking at investing in our kids, investing in our families that are going to impact the future generations. We're looking at how to live generously, how to just have impact with the wealth that we've created. And today on this episode, we are having a conversation with Erik Averill, who is co-founder of AWM Capital, and they help athletes, pro athletes, take their wealth and think long-term and build the wealth for impact. So this is a great conversation and cannot wait to share it with you. Erik, really excited to be talking to you for the Farline and hearing about where you came from, talking about wealth, talking about family, generations. But thanks so much for being on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a few years in the making, so I've always enjoyed our conversation. So glad we get to do it here.
Yeah. So this conversation with Erik is a long time coming. It really started the idea for me wanting to start this podcast. And we were having a conversation up at this organization called Praxis, which is an incubator for for-profit, nonprofit startups trying to make a change in the world, make really good impact. And we just started having this conversation about what does it look like to live generationally? What does it look like to have wealth, but then also create impact with that wealth? And so this is a conversation that is going to continue on that topic. And Erik is passionate about this stuff and looking forward to having this chat. Yeah,
it's something that, I think resonates in all of our hearts to say we all want to thrive as humans, and innately we're born into families. And for a lot of us, we desire to have families and you want to see all of those individuals thrive. And so there were these aha moments of how you can use capital and money and align that it becomes a blessing and an accelerator. Doesn't have to be a deterrent, doesn't have to be a negative. So excited to jump into the conversation.
Amazing. So just a little background on you, and we'll have you more fill it in, but you run AWM Capital, which is a family office that helps other people manage money. So we talk about that and sort of how you got started, like you and your brother.
Yeah. So correct. We're what's called a multi-family office. If you don't know what a family office is, then you think we do real estate. If you know what a family office is, that multi-family is very important. So in very simple terms is for our own family, the Averill family, you mentioned my brother, us along with some other families collectively run an organization, think private wealth management, but far beyond that, where we're trying to align all of our resources to help our families create generational success, both financially and personally. And the way that I arrived here was not, this was not something when I was 6 years old. I said, you know what, when I grow up, I want to run a family office. I was actually a professional baseball player. So it was through my experience of being a professional athlete that I was first introduced to money as a byproduct of doing something that you love. And in the professional athlete space, there's a lot of money, but not a long history of making great decisions and having a desire to want to make an impact. This was something I was very curious about, saying, why is it that athletes make a lot of money yet don't end up having great results, especially because they have advisors or people in their life that are promising to help them out. And so that led me on my trajectory. When baseball was over, I made that decision is that I wanted to enter into the financial space. I wanted to help advise athletes around their money. And even back in 2007-8, when I first started doing that, I had a very, very tiny view of what that meant. And it was over the last 15 years to really understand that it's not about maximizing money. It's about maximizing family success. And how do we strategically use all of our resources in support of an alignment of that? And so it was that journey from a professional athlete getting into just the traditional financial advisor space at one of the big Wall Street firms. And then connecting it to understanding what is it truly that generational families have done to have success generation after generation, which is, I imagine, talk about, it's actually very difficult to do. Less than less than 10% of ultra wealthy families will transfer wealth past the third generation. So the default is not just that athletes go broke. The default is that the wealthiest people in the world, that 90% of them will not successfully see generational wealth beyond the third generation.
Yeah. And so your brother was also a pro athlete. And so you've got that and you came together to start this. When did it start? And maybe talk about how you got into the place where you're now working with other professional athletes or people that have exited companies and brought them into what you're doing now.
Yeah. So in 2010, Brandon, my older brother, who's the managing partner of the family office now. Brandon played baseball at UCLA and minor league baseball in Houston Astros organization. He was up working in Napa doing corporate banking. I always say that I took him from his dream job because this guy loves wine, and he was actually doing a lot of the banking for the wineries up there. But enticed him and said, "Hey, what a fun thing it would be to build something together as brothers." And so we joined together. Brandon is definitely what I would say the brains of the operation. He's our integrator. He's our CEO, and he takes vision and makes things happen. And the two of us, selfishly motivated, wanted to have our own families that succeed, right? And we wanted to be good stewards of the resources that we've been blessed with. And it set us on this journey to try to ask a lot of questions, not what exists from a service model, but what is best, what is ideal, and really how are things created into the fabric of the world of how we think wealth is supposed to be handled. And so in 2010, we were at a big Wall Street firm. We left and went to a private wealth management company in Pasadena, California, where we learned a lot about the way to do things properly. And then in 2017 is when Brandon and I launched out and started AWM Capital. And at that point, we had a very small amount of client base, and today we have the privilege to really steward or just north of 100 athlete families alongside our own family.
That's incredible. And so I think what will be helpful in this conversation for people that are listening is thinking to the people, this is maybe for a lot of these, it's first generational wealth, right? They might have come from just different situations where now they are the first generation of wealth. And you sort of battle there's a lot of conversations here that I want to have, but one of them is this battle, like you mentioned, which this generation makes the money, this generation spends the money. So how do we think generationally, but getting more to like the beginning of it? Like, let's say you are first generational wealth. You have just come into money, you've exited a company, or you're been successful. How are you advising some of these younger athletes or these people that are in that position where they just came into money and just more like the strategy that you're conveying to them? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely does. And that's the majority of our clients, right? We focus and specialize in first generation wealth creators, whether through a professional athlete career or through being a founder or an early employee, right, at a company that exits. And the first thing that I would say we deviate from everybody else is reminding the wealth creator that they didn't originally set out with money at the center of the decision. Money became a byproduct of them pursuing to be great at something else, right? Like, we woke up and we were focused on how do we be the best in the world at our craft, whether it's an athlete or the passion of what you were building. And the world found it so valuable that it resulted in financial capital. But 99.9%, or at least the clients we align with, is none of them started out with the comment of, I want to be rich. Now let me go try to find a company to build, right? We understand that won't lead to success. So it's really this interesting thing. What happens in this space is you have this wealth event, and instantly everybody's trying to tell you that you should put money at the center of every decision. And now all of a sudden it becomes about maximizing the spreadsheet. Whereas as we first start with this conversation of going, let's have this conversation around what is the philosophy of wealth? What's the purpose of wealth? That we want to always be human-centered. So we talk about, we are a human-centered family office, that the definition of success for us is going, the most important assets on the family balance sheet are the humans. And so how do we work very hard to understand what are the values of each individual of the family collectively, and what is the mission? We like to say that we always make decisions based off of mission, and then that will inform the alignment of the tool, the product, the financial decision. And so first, helping them understand that money does not now need to control your life just because you have money. It's really about aligning it to what's going to lead a thriving, fulfilling, flourishing life. And so that I'll pause there on that point, because I can't overstate the importance of it. Because what typically happens is you have this wealth event, and then people start telling you instantly, before they even understand who you are, what's important to you, who's important to you, they start telling you tools and tactics. You need to invest in this. You need to start your own venture fund. You need to do this tax planning strategy. And we go to strategies before really understanding the intent behind it.
And so can you give an example of like what is, when you're talking to them more, because I think most people think of that. They think of, okay, how do I either make more money with my money, or a lot of people probably want to spend a lot of money. But I would imagine if they're talking to you, they're wanting to build more wealth. How do you transition the conversation, or what are you talking about when we're thinking more generationally and more educating your clients around that topic?
Yeah. So when we start to really think through, say a family comes to us, they buy into the philosophy. It's like, yes, I want my kids to benefit from this success that I've had, right? Or my wife and I have had, is we want to set this family up. We say, fantastic. Let's understand from an education standpoint, what are the positive things when we look back? There are blueprints, there are examples to say, this is what's happened. This is what has been successful in the past, but also here are all of the potholes, and here are the things to avoid. So the good news for us is we're not guessing, right? Like, we can look back a lot of the research and go, hey, why did the Vanderbilts, why did they blow hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in today's dollars? Like, why is this happen? Why do 90% of families not arrive at the intent that they have, right? Like, as athletes, we know this. We all want to win a game, but not everybody wins. And so you start to ask these questions and go, it's not okay to just have an intent to have generational success. We actually have to have systems. We have to have processes. We have to have understanding. And so that first thing is we say, if there's any success to be had, it's a combination of three things. First, you have to have the knowledge. You do have to have knowledge to be successful. But knowledge is not enough. We have to build skill sets, because I can know a lot about football, but if I don't have the skill sets, I don't get to play on Sunday, right? And then I also have to have the discipline. I think all of us have been in life around some of the most talented people on the planet, yet they don't have the longevity or the success in whatever area because they just didn't have the discipline. So it's knowledge, skills, and discipline. And so we start on that knowledge base with the family to go, the reason 97% of families don't transfer wealth has nothing to do with taxes, investment, insurance, or estate planning. It is not the technical side. Research shows that the technical side only accounts for 3% of the reason families fail. 97% comes to trust and communication, comes to something called family dynamics. And this shouldn't surprise any of us, right? Because money is like dynamite, or it's like gasoline. When fire is inside of a fireplace, it's beautiful. It keeps us warm. We all love it. But if I dump gasoline on it and it gets out of the fireplace, it burns down the house. And that's really what money is that if money is dumped on to unhealthy relationships without skill sets, it will destroy your family. But if we dump money into a well-resourced, skillful family, that's how we have generational success. So and we'll get into the actual financial tools and tactics of where can you build generational wealth? Why do the wealthier continue to get wealthier? That's not a secret either. But it has to be married next to the family skill set and the health and the relationship, because you have to have both to be generationally successful.
Yeah, I love that. And I mean, one of the books that you actually recommended to me was Take Back Your Family. And this talks a lot about sort of the individual and the family unit versus basically it talks a lot about more of this generational view, this long game where you're thinking multiple generations down the road, where we had like the Jewish culture, right? They are making decisions for their great grandchildren,
yes,
versus just living today, which is what most of every advertisement you listen to is about, your happiness right now, right this minute. And so can you talk a little bit into that and how that book has sort of impacted you and how you're thinking, advising people?
Yeah. And this is clearly right. Different people have different philosophies. I think what we have learned and we've adopted and we think is the differentiator is when you're thinking in different timelines and roles and responsibilities. So what we try to instill into our clients and what it is for me and for the Averill family is we're technically not the owners of anything, right? We are the stewards and trustees, for me, of the Averill last name for however long I get the privilege to be here on earth, right? And so it's one of these things that if I take a role as a trustee and a steward for the future generational success, for the great grandkids I hope that I meet, but for the great grandkids I know I will never meet, if I'm making decisions based off of trying to set them up, it changes the game. And I think this is really hard. And this is actually where the wealthiest of the wealthiest who have been successful for 5 generations, 6, 7, 8 generations, they have outperformed everybody else. Because even when you look at investment returns, right? If I'm trying to do the quick home run or I don't have enough liquidity to play the long game, then I'm never going to have the opportunity to have assets that take time to grow, right? I won't get to participate properly in early stage venture capital. I'm not going to buy private land or certain type of real estate projects because I'm trying to make a return in 5 years or 10 years, let alone if I say, hey, I'm not actually even worried about this return for 30 years. What's really interesting when you start to understand investing pre-industrial revolution is really what heritage was, or what inheritance was. This was land, this was rights, right? It was heritage. And so when I start to shift, or we as clients or a community who are trying to set up generational success, start to understand step one is you have to shift your time frame and you have to shift your understanding of what your role and responsibility is. The wrong way to think about it, at least in our opinion, is this is my money. This is your mom and dad's wealth that we created. And, the only question we're asking is how much is too much to give to our kids? At some definition, when we die, and we use legal instruments called estate planning to try to rule from the grave or to control. Very different than if, hey, I'm accepting this role as a steward and a trustee of this family from my parents that went before me. And at some point, when I acknowledge that my future children have the proper skill sets, capacity, and desire, I will actually transfer control while I'm still alive and hopefully set the mission of the family. So very different, but I think it is key to what makes people either generationally successful or short-term successful.
I mean, one of the things that you just sort of hit on that I've heard a lot of people say, you've even got guys like Warren Buffett that are saying this, is that they don't want to burden their children with the wealth they've created. And so therefore, like what you mentioned, they're only giving them a percentage of this, and then they're giving away the rest. So they're doing something or tying it up. So I know, because you and I've had this conversation, it's like, okay, we're going to now, if we don't want to burden our children with this, now we're just going to give it to somebody else's children to do with it.
Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. It's in one way, to just be direct, it's like passing the buck, right? It's like saying it's not my responsibility. It's going to screw somebody up. As long as it doesn't screw my kids up, I don't really care about the end result for humanity. We don't have to look far to understand what happens when we transfer money when there are no skill sets or there's no vision for the money. It's why a lot of our philanthropic capital has not been successful, right? And it's why certain organizations have to continue to come back for the well is we transfer money thinking it's going to solve issues, but it doesn't because there aren't skill sets. So we think a better question is not how much money is too much, but how equipped are the future recipients of the wealth? And so in that situation, I might find out that, you know what, if I have a child who doesn't have the skill sets and hasn't made good decisions in life, I shouldn't give them $100,000, let alone give them $100 million. But on the flip side is if there has been a trained and equipped apprenticed son or daughter who is going to make wise decisions, why would we not want that person in charge of significant capital that we know that wealth is impact? So if we have an equipped, skilled, wisdom-filled expert who may or may not be your son or daughter, why would we rob them in society of the opportunity for them to create good out of this wealth, right? And a large part of this goes to that shift of thinking you have to train at a very young age that in our philosophy, money is not meant to increase the luxury of our lifestyle, but to increase the blessing and the stewardship of it, to build companies, create jobs, release the burdens of the least of these. And so it really becomes like for Sadie and I as parents, we're trying to equip our 3 children to have skill sets and wisdom. And then at some point we'll decide whether or not they have, met the job qualification and how much responsibility they should have.
I love that. As I was coming up with just sort of what this podcast was going to be, I was talking to a few different friends, and one of the things I was talking about is wealth and generational wealth, and he was like, that's something about that doesn't really, that doesn't feel good, the way that I then said, listen, I get that. But when I'm talking about wealth, I'm not talking about just getting rich and like being this like super uber wealthy rich guy. Like I'm thinking about this idea of building wealth to create impact. Like when you have a lot of money and you've been given a lot, it's a resource that you can then use to empower, to encourage, to bless, to create jobs, to create businesses, to give with impact. And I think that's another thing too, that I would imagine that AWM Capital's help. Like there's a component of generosity as well, right? Where they're
absolutely
giving.
Yeah. We talk a lot about, all wealth is impact. And I think there's even this important thing to not bifurcate. This is for profit and this is for philanthropy. You have one pocket, right? You have one pocket in which you're making decisions. So whether it's the praxis community that you and I are a part of, that we're thinking about thoughtfully as we deploy capital into for-profit businesses, we have to ask the questions. Is this good? Is it producing good practices? Is it producing good products and good services that us as a shareholder, we have responsibility for the end result of what gets built and the humans, how they're treated at every step of kind of the system. But that philanthropy is such an important thing is what you and I agree on is, I understand it, right? Like when we think of wealth and you hear of the stories, super sad, right? Of like, we watch people who are very famous and very wealthy, it ends in disaster. I think the stat is like the 5 wealthiest people in the world, like there's like 7 divorces amongst the 5 of them. People have been married and re-divorced. Like nobody gets married and goes, hey, you know what? Let's set out to try and get divorced. Or, hey, when we have kids, let's like not have a good relationship with our kids. And so I think what a lot of people see is money and they go, oh, money's the issue. Money's actually what I believe is creationally was designed as a good tool and instrument. It's just in the hands of unhealthy people, it turns into a negative tool as opposed to the right tool.
Yeah. And I mean, my view of this is tying into money and family and dysfunction, and then also back to the responsibility of raising your children to inherit well, is it really comes down to intentionality, right? So often, and this is another thing that I've described, is so often like whatever your business is, whether you're a pro athlete, whether you are running a business, whether you're an employee, whether you're an investor, so often I think in our culture today, it has been this work, dad leaves, like I was re-listening to that book, Take Back Your Family, and how it talks about, it went from farming where mom and dad were running the house. They were CEOs of the house. They were both in there, where it changed in this industrial revolution where dad left and see ya, and then dad comes home and then he's off working. But there's this disconnect where now dad spends all this time working, and then he's not, like, in today's culture, especially, like, we're both in, you're in Arizona, right?
I'm in Arizona. Yep.
But you're from California.
Yes.
But this culture that we live in where men are working so much and they build this wealth, and then from there they come back like, hey, here you go. This has been my job as dad, is to provide. But they're not actually present. They're not actually intentional with their children. And again, that's like really the root of like what I want to get at is like in this podcast and through these conversations that I'm having is like, how do we do this well? Like, how do we start with intention, or how do we even, like, I think most people listening are people that, like, they want to do this, but don't know how because they haven't been given an example.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it resonates so much. I think a few things come to mind. It's first understanding that we don't live in a neutral environment or society. And what I mean by that is, it's why the book that came out a few years ago, Atomic Habits, James Clear, the author, has this statement that you will not rise to the level of your intentions. You're going to fall to the level of your systems, right? And so I think when most of us have intentions, we want to have amazing relationships with our significant other. We want to have great relationships with our kids. We want them to have successful lives. So the intent is there. But when we wake up, there is a societal machine called consumerism, marketing, advertising, that is always trying to extract value from our lives and also tell us we are not worthy unless we do X, Y, Z, unless we have this product, this service, this level of power, this level of fame. And so there's like this awareness that you have to like stop and go, oh, I have these glasses on called American consumerism that goes, you know what it means to be successful, Dad, is like, you got to leave your house. You got to go get a high paying job. You got to have a side gig. Oh, Mom, like you've got to have like the Lululemon outfit and be fit, be a rock star mom, and have a side business. And we've started to believe this lie, right? And so what ends up happening is we end up on this conveyor belt where like companies are extracting our lives, like companies and consumerism's extracting our money, and it leaves us completely like unfulfilled, right? And actually scratching our heads being like, I'm trying to get ahead. So I think you have to recognize that's the water we live in. And if we don't be intentional to live separately or differently, you're not going to win. So there's the awareness piece. Here's the other thing. Good luck doing that alone, right? Like you try to do it alone. This is what we first talked about. And I love what you're doing there in Southern California is building a community, going, it takes a village to raise the child, right? And I actually believe that if we want to go against a force, there has to be a community of us goes like, hey, Braden, you know what? That was the right decision. Even though it seems like economically or from a status or a power situation, man, if you would have taken this job, if you would have done that, to have a community that goes, hey, remember that mission we're on to create a thriving family? And we believe we will create wealth long term. It may not benefit me and my wife, but it's going to benefit our kids and our grandkids. That's a different conversation. And it's the redefinition of wealth too. So the root ancient word wealth wasn't financial success. It actually meant well-being. So if it's like, I want to have a wealthy life, I want to have well-being, I want to have thriving, it's not always just financial. Yes, money is important. And we'll talk about how to build that faithfully and significantly. But I just went off on a tangent. But I think it's an important thing that we talk about the world we live in.
Yeah, because if money is what you're deriving your happiness on and how much you have, or where you get your identity, which could be in your job, whether you're an athlete, because every athlete, they stop being an athlete at some point, right? Mm-hmm. You've got a very short period where you're that pro athlete. Yeah. Then you hit a certain age, like, hey, you're done. Or you get that injury, like how many guys have gotten injured and it's like ripped out from underneath them.
Yeah.
And same deal happens with running your business, whatever your work is. You find your identity in that. But how do we, I guess, what are things that you're telling people about how to shift that or where to find your identity in that better definition of wealth?
Yeah, it's we talk a lot about fulfilling your family mission to first help you. We say there's a few kind of aha moments or things we have to reset or go down the road of. Is we all have a built-in view of how we view family, how we view money, how we view work, and really how we view the overall, let's call worldview or purpose of why we're all here, right? The big questions. And so I think it's starting that journey to go, what is fulfilling that family mission? Like, you were born into a family. What is it that you're hopeful for of these future children, the type of life they have? And then going, okay, like, children are the best window into healing ourselves. And what I mean by that around identity is going, like, every child parenting book tells me, like, don't call your kids stupid because it impacts them. Don't become a performance parent because it impacts them, right? And like, as you start to think through these things and you go, so wait a second, like, why do you love your child? Because they're your child. Like, I love them because they exist, right? In that book, it talks a lot about your kids aren't liabilities, they're assets from the minute they're born. And the child conversation, I think, actually becomes a helpful identity thing for us too, is to go, we are worthy. We don't need to perform, and it's not status or power. It's existence that we are worthy. And then out of that, this discovery of what are your passions and your skill sets and your callings, and then how do you use those in service of whatever you feel that mission of your family is. And that's where we spend a lot of identity, is going, your identity is not in what you do, it's in who you are. Your worth is not in what the world says. Your worth is that you have been created and you are significant. So now how fun it becomes if I understand, okay, I'm worthy, period. Let's put a proper role view and like what your jobs are. And these change. But in this season of life, if you're a dad, if you're a husband, what are those roles? So the most significant role I have is not running AWM or being the trusted advisor for some of the most successful athletes on the planet. It's actually, my primary role is to be a father and a husband. Like, that is my primary job. And so everything extends out of the family, right? And so as I leave the household, I take Sadie and Olivia and Levi and Jude with me as a representative of the Averill family on mission together. Like, we are this family team, which is from, Bethke's book of like, we are on a team on mission. And therefore all of our decisions, it's like, hey, when we collectively do something, we're on a mission together. Every time we've had these conversations and the trainings over the years with our families, the richness with which they wake up is way different. And that's something that is compelling enough to fight the story that America's consumerism wants you, or the world, not America, the world's, agenda for your life.
Yeah. And how often are you communicating this to your kid? How old are your kids again?
So we're 8, 6, and 3.
All right. Good ages. I think people can hear this and think, like, if they're just starting out their family, it's amazing. If you can have this sort of a mission before you start a family, and because when they're younger, it's so much easier to like get them to do things and be on board, versus when they're older, it's really hard to switch. It's hard. But you could sit there and be like, okay, well, it's already ship's already sailed, versus I think there's always a time to start now. But how are you, one, like personally within your own family, how are you sort of communicating this mission? Obviously, you and your wife are probably on board with this together, but then, how are you doing that? And then the next question would be, if as you're sitting down with people who have never like created a family mission and maybe they already have kids, like how do you advise them to sit down and start doing that?
Yeah. So I'll answer how we go about it now. As you said, like we're in a very unique, grateful situation that our kids are young, and you can call it what it is, programming them to believe their identity. And so we have a little identity statement that every day the kids, they get in the car and we go off to school, and Sadie and I will ask them, "Who are you?" And they will repeat back to us, and it's very strategic. Is to go. They will say, Olivia will say, "I'm the daughter of Erik and Sadie," letting her root herself in like her place within the family, right? So I'm the daughter of Erik and Sadie. I'm a child of God. For us, our faith is very important. I am loved by Jesus. I am Olivia Grace Averill, and then each kid, it's been fascinating. They add their own things in. It's, like I am a great gymnastics player. Like I'm great at gymnastics. I love people well. So we ask them the identity statement, and then we say, "What is your job?" And it is to love everyone and be a good steward of everything. And so every morning, this is the identity statement and the job statement. So that we've been doing that for probably 4 years now. And the 3-year-old, I mean, Jude's on it, right? Here's the thing. You try to go to school without asking them that, "Hey, ask me who I am." Like they crave it. And then we have a family mission statement. And here's the thing I tell you about the family mission statement. It's super hard to do. This is why nobody does it. But I also think we overcomplicate it. I sat down with Sadie and we there are so many amazing resources. I wouldn't overthink this. I'd go through the familyteams.com. They've got a little workbook, like answer the questions of what's important to you, who's important to you, from a value standpoint. And a lot of it is what Sadie and I have talked about is we have 7 family values. We're a multi-generational family that abides in Jesus, that when people interact with our family, they feel seen, heard, and loved. We're skillful workers. We're faithful stewards. We're healthy. And so you work through these things. That's how our family does it. And then here's what I would say. Say I'm talking to a family and they've got high school kids. Here's what not to do. And here's how family governance never works. Say, "Kids, we're going to have a sit-down 2-hour meeting and we're going to create a family mission statement and values." Do not do that. I joke around. Exactly, right? And you see this in generational families. It's like when the patriarch and the matriarch who's very wealthy goes, "We're going to do family governance." And they hire this company and they bring them on and they pay these companies hundreds of thousands of dollars to run family meetings. And it's a complete disaster because the kids and everybody's kind of looking at you like, what, "Oh, you just decided today you're going to be a good dad? Sweet." It doesn't work. So this is where I would say is even start something small and grow. Is if I had high school age kids or junior high age kids, is it's sharing with them "Hey, I've been on this journey. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about our family? How well do we interact as a team? What does team mean to you?" And I think here's the thing I'm telling you. It's not an overnight solution of you having a mission statement. That's just a byproduct of you write down what actually exists. I think the first thing you can do is there was a book I was recommended to me years ago called Grow Yourself Up. And the whole premise of the book is you can't change anybody else. The only person that you can change is yourself. And so I think it's if you have this desire to change the trajectory of how things are going, you start by leading by that example and having admission conversations to your spouse, to your children of saying, "Hey, you know what? like this stuff I've been reading, and I realized there's a lot of stuff I maybe would have done differently, but man, you guys are so important to me now. And like, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? And I think it's the sidebar conversations riding on the car on the way to practice. And then over time, just start journal, and then you bring it out. And this is what's been helpful. Families, I help our families. I actually document a lot of it. I ask lots of questions. It's almost like a podcast interview. And then I come back to them and say, hey, I put this draft together. What do you think? So it's way easier to start with something than to a blank piece of paper. So you take this and you drop it in front of your 16-year-old kid. They might be like, I think it sucks. That's good feedback. Might hurt, but I think that's how I would do it in real time. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
100%. I think with anyone, it's just really, we can create these things that feel overwhelming, that feel big, and therefore we never do them.
Yeah.
Right. Versus start. It's something I just thought of because my oldest is 14, almost 15. And, the sitting down, it's you get the eye rolls, and, we started to have these, but like an idea that just came to me as you were thinking this is ChatGPT, which could be fun for a kid, is you can go into ChatGPT and say, hey, I'm trying to write family mission statement. Could you ask me as many questions as you need to help us come up with a statement? And so they'll start doing it and have the kids answer those questions. And then it'll start asking more questions. It's actually, I've done that for branding. I've done that for other things, but could be a way to engage your older children in something as well. But it's sort of asking those questions, and it's just starting.
Yeah. And another great place to start is something that's very routine or methodical, right? Like you think through teams. Like I know you played sports, or even within companies. Maybe you're listening to this podcast and you've never played a sport, but you've probably had to work with somebody on some team in your job. We have rituals, right? Like there's the locker room ritual that happens, and what creates connectivity with people is shared experiences. And so the best thing you can do as a family is start to create shared experiences or rhythms or routines. Some of the best things I've learned from Pryor and Bethke in that book Family Revision is living in a life of 7 days of these routines. And so every Saturday night for our family, we celebrate something called Shabbat. So it's getting ready for us as in the Christian faith of entering into a Sabbath, and this ritual with our kids understanding that this is a rhythm that the Averills do. Why? And there's an intentionality behind it. We light a candle, we sing a song, and it's not overly complicated, but our kids have learned rhythmically as, hey, every Saturday night, we're going to spend time with family and friends, and we're going to rest and celebrate. Our kids know every year we're going to have a family reunion trip where the intent of it is the Averill family team. And it's like, do the fun, quirky things. And your young kids or your older kids may act like they hate it. They will die for it. Why? Because getting the t-shirt that says something about identity. So this is where, maybe Braden, you're super creative, is like, you don't have to put the Flynn family reunion on the t-shirt, but this is something Sadie, my wife, thought about, was like, hey, what if we created our own family symbols and logos? And so it's understated. But one of the things is you create little things your kids know, a hat, a bracelet of something, and everywhere they take it, it's a really, really subtle reminder of like, I am a Flynn. And this is what it means. And so those rhythms and experiences and giving them tangible artifacts, these are understated ways. It might take you years to get a family mission statement. You can instantly this week make a new rhythm that defines your family. You can instantly create something immediately, and it's going to do the job better than some piece of paper that has really nice, words on it, but isn't actually lived out.
Yeah, I love that. And I really think it's this idea of starting. Like, I think that can be such a, like, if you haven't done this thing, it's really hard to start, but it's also really easy to start. There's so much, it's this top down, trickle down effect where we as parents have this responsibility to lead. If you want your kids to be generous, show them what it looks like to be generous, right? If you want your kids to be like angry and yelling, be angry and yell all the time, right? So like they really, really like follow your lead. And I think it's easy to pass the baton, and whether you think like school's going to do it or church is going to do it, or the youth leaders, or your wife's going to do it, or your husband's going to do it, it's so easy to pass the baton versus you actually take the responsibility to start and create that intention to really impact your family, which in those, I'll put all the links to those books down below as well, because they're really phenomenal and game changers with countercultural to where things are right now. And I think in a very important way.
Yeah. And a very practical question that you can, like, if somebody says, how do I start? One of the first questions we give all of our clients is, think about your great-great-grandchildren who will never know you. What is it that you want them to think and to know about you when they hear your name? Because it removes it enough that goes like, what you're probably not going to write down is like, I made $100 million. Like, that is so irrelevant to your great-great-grandkids. You might tell them how. Hey, work ethic. I want them to know that I care deeply about their great-great-grandma, or their, like, it becomes this thing that it's far enough removed away that you're not going to put a bunch of like short-term things on it. You're going to put the essence. And then that gives you like, oh, maybe this is the type of person I want to be. And that's a great tool to start. And then this is where I think money is an amazing tool. Going back to, I know we've been on the softer side of this conversation. Money is an incredible tool for impact. And you want to get your kids engaged, do it one of two ways. Hey, I'm building a business, or I'm investing in a business, or we're going to use this money to change somebody's life or to participate in that. Because the other thing we've done wrong in the financial space is we've removed the relationship from the end result of the impact of the capital in between. We have all these in-betweens, right? I put my money into a fund that I actually never meet the person who's going to live in the building that it's funding. Money at the end of the day creates economic flourishing if done well. And we as the shareholders have a responsibility to the relationship of what that capital is going to do. That is very countercultural. We have created this construct of something called maximizing your after-tax return according to some abstract benchmark. Like, all of that's made up, right? Like, it's all made up. So if I say for this asset class, this risk-adjusted return, we just made that up. I'm not saying that it's not important. It's very important. However, you're not actually after a risk-adjusted return when you're using capital. If you're thinking through mission and stewardship and trustees, it's going, this money is going to impact or create something. What impact? Is it a dynamite blast where it blew something up, or was it a positive impact? And so get a kid and be like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Do you want to build this business with me? Do you want to invest with me? Like, kids, like, they love to build and be a part of things the same way that when they were little itty bitty and they climbed in that kitchen and they were annoying because you're just trying to get dinner made. And they're like, Mom, can I help? Yes. Like, include them. Use money as that tool to create the human relationship.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it is just this different view of money, right? It can feel like this insidious thing. It can feel like this thing that it's everything that everybody wants, but it's also this idea of it's a tool for impact. And that is incredible. I know we're going to have more conversations, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but if people, you run a podcast as well with your brother, right?
We do. Yep. So it's called Athlete CEO. So you can tune in there. And then obviously from our family office standpoint, we're AWM Capital. You just type in AWM Capital, and that's the easiest way to find us for some more of these conversations.
Love it. Well, when we have the live event, you're going to come down and it'll be fun. But thank you so much, Erik. And looking forward to having more of these conversations. And you are doing really good work. And I just hope that it continues and you impact a lot more lives.
Yeah, well, thank you, and you're the one who's put it into practice having these conversations. So I'm just grateful to have somebody else who's a fellow journeyman on this mission.
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. Erik is someone I know we're going to have back on this show because he is someone who is thinking through this and has put a ton of thought into what it looks like to live intentionally, to live thinking generationally, to think about how he's parenting, how he's raising his children, to inherit, to have the responsibility to make impact with the money that he has built, for them to then take that money and grow it, to then have more impact, further impact. And right, we have the ability to change the trajectory of our families. We didn't all grow up with great backgrounds. So being able to be the starters, to live intentionally now, that's going to change the trajectory of your kids' lives and their kids' lives. What an amazing thing that you have the ability to do. And that encouragement to just start, right? It can feel overwhelming on how to do this and how to do it well, but it just takes starting. Would love to walk this journey with you. I'd love to hear from you. I'll have info down below on how to reach out. But this is what Erik was saying. It's like, it is a community thing. You cannot do this on your own. It will be a struggle on your own. And community is the thing that helps build that together. So I'm planning on building this as a community. I ultimately want to have live events. If that's something you're interested, let me know. Figuring that all out. But this is the Farline, where we are helping you think long-term, down the road, how to do the intentional work now for results that are going to have lots of impact. So we'll see you around. We'd love you to walk this journey with us. Hope you love this. We'll see you on the next one.